This painting of the Virgin Mary and the infant Jesus was commissioned by Federico da Montefeltro, Duke of Urbino, possibly to celebrate his son's birth, Guidobaldo, and to honor his wife Battista Sforza, who died in the same year. The ostrich egg suspended from the shell-shaped niche over Mary's head has multiple possible meanings. The egg hanging from within the shell niche could represent a pearl, symbolizing Immaculate Conception, since the shell creates the pearl without any male intervention. The egg was one of the heraldic symbols of the Montefeltro family, and is a frequent symbol of the creation used in this painting to acknowledge the birth of the Duke's son, Guidobaldo. The mysterious egg hovers over Mary the way the dove, Holy Spirit, hovered over Christ in the baptism. Eggs frequently hang over altars dedicated to the Virgin, symbolizing the Immaculate Conception and Resurrection. Ostrich eggs became a symbol of virgin birth because it was believed, incorrectly, that ostriches let their eggs hatch in the sunlight without sitting on them, the absent mother reference serving as a symbol of Guidobaldo's dead mother, Battista. This copy is considered the closest to a painting of Lleida and the Swan by Leonardo, lost by the 18th century and now known only in copies and preparatory drawings, one that showed Lleida kneeling and one standing, another of the head and bust of Lleida, as well as sketches of swans that Leonardo made during the time he was in Milan working on the Mona Lisa. In Leonardo's final version, copied here by Cesare Sesto, Lleida, with very youthful head and opulent, mature body, is standing, gazing lovingly down at her newly hatched children. She is embracing the swan, who has his wing around her, his head on her shoulder, eyeing her with desire. As in many of Leonardo's subjects, Lleida's hair was painted in minute detail. She was surrounded by the most fertile landscape that Leonardo, aged 54, had produced since his workshop days. The swan was Zeus in one of his many disguises who'd seduced Lleida. The two sets of half-god, half-mortal twins at her feet, hatching from eggs, were Castor and Pollux, and Helen and Clytemnestra. In the tradition of Dutch and Flemish moralizing tales, Greuze painted a domestic drama, the message of which is made clear by the inclusion of clues: broken egg symbolizing lost innocence, and the impish boy with bow and arrow, perhaps Cupid. The broken egg cannot be repaired, nor can the girl's lost purity be recovered. It is the first in a sequence of memorable works in which Greuze used shattered objects to symbolize lost innocence, primarily among the rustic lower classes. The domestic scene takes place within a tight compositional triangle, where gestures and gazes fluidly draw the viewer along the lines of the figures. The old woman angrily berates the guilty young man, who appears to be defending himself. His elbow leads our eye to the sad, teary-eyed maiden sitting at his feet, as does the outstretched, accusingly pointed hand of the old woman. The broken eggs lying next to the fallen maiden lead us to the young Cupid, who stares out at us unrepentantly. The painting of textures, eggshells, fabrics, and skin is rich and sensuous, in contrast to the rather stark surroundings and bleak tale of seduction, remorse, and scolding. This early still life, one of the very few works signed and dated by Cézanne, was painted for submission to the prestigious Paris art exhibition, the Salon, of 1865, but was rejected by the jury, most likely because Cézanne had violated a hallowed norm. Still life with bread and eggs set against a dark background is composed not of the makings of a luxurious meal in the time-honored tradition of still life, but rather of the cheap utensils and the meager food of a poor artist. In his paintings of the 1860s, Cézanne painted in a style inspired by the 17th century Spanish masters, notably Giuseppe de Ribera and Francisco de Zurbaran, highlighting motifs in the foreground that are set against a primarily black shadowed background. Cézanne's table is barely distinguishable from the background. The meager fare of bread, eggs, onions, knife, crumpled tablecloth, and empty wine glass are highlighted. Unlike those of earlier masters, however, Cézanne's illuminated objects do not contain symbolic or religious meaning. As everyday objects in the artist's modest life, they evoke a mood of somber austerity. When Constantin Brancusi came to Paris from Romania in 1904, he turned down an offer to become an apprentice to the sculptor Auguste Rodin, rejecting the venerated master's use of heavily textured, narrative-rich, additive-modeled sculpture for the stripped-down, reductive carving of increasingly pure and abstract forms. The human head as an ovoid or egg-like shape, separate from the body, occupied Brancusi for nearly 2 decades, giving rise to numerous interpretations about the artist's obsession with metaphysical and spiritual reality, eternity, and timelessness. The title, Beginning of the World, can refer to the egg as a symbol of the creation myth. On its side, some say the egg shape evoked repose. Brancusi's friend, the poet Ezra Pound, believed that the horizontal oval seemed to come to life and appeared ready to levitate. Others say it appears like a newborn on a birthing dish. The stone base is inspired by the Greek or Orthodox cross, suggesting religious associations that are consistent with Brancusi's statements invoking the godlike role of an artist. Belgian surrealist artist René Magritte's collective affinities alludes to a scientific novella of the same name written in 1809 by German philosopher Johann von Goethe, in which he wrote, "None are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free." Magritte's own description of the origin of this painting clearly exemplifies surrealism's characteristic element of surprise and unexpected juxtaposition, as well as the attraction to Freud's theories of free association and dream analysis. Applying surrealist logic, one might read the strange juxtaposition of a perfectly shaped white egg trapped in a bird cage as the natural, seemingly free beauty of a perfect egg contrasted with the implications of the cage, unnatural, trapped, lack of freedom. Although the bird is in effect caged in its shell even before born in nature, it pecks its way out to possible freedom. The bird in this egg will not find freedom, but rather emerge into a bird cage hanging in a man-made architectural structure. Salvador Dali painted Geopolitical, Child Watching the Birth of the New Man in 1943 while in the United States during World War II. Painted not long after the United States entered the war, it reflects the newfound importance the United States held for the world and for Dali. The man hatching from a large egg-like globe breaks through the new world power on the map, the United States. Africa and South America are both enlarged, representing the growing importance of the Third World, while Europe is being crushed by the man's hand, indicating its diminishing importance as an international power. The geopoliticus child of the title is clinging to the knees of a naked androgynous figure who is pointing to the unfolding global transformation. Some have speculated that Dali himself was the hatching new man. Delighting in enigma, Dali did not comment. However, at the time of this painting, he had developed a renewed interest in Catholicism, which could, enigmatically, give rise to opposite interpretations. One, that the hatching of the new man represented Dali's own religious rebirth, or two, that Dali's visual vocabulary became more focused on universal rather than personal symbols, indicating that the new man was not, in fact, Dali himself. Paul Outerbridge began his artistic career as an illustrator and designer, taking up photography professionally in the 1920s, primarily in advertising in New York City. From 1925 to 1929, he worked for Vogue magazine in Paris, where he met and was no doubt influenced by photographer Edward Steichen. In 1943, the year of this photograph, he gave up commercial photography and moved to Hollywood. Egg in Spotlight was photographed during the height of World War II, at a time when the outcome of the war was uncertain. Amid the chaos of war, Outerbridge created a serene focus on an object that evoked simultaneous associations with myth and reality, birth, regeneration, perfection of both shape and nutrition. The pure, streamlined geometric forms in shades of gray, black, and white, the ovoid egg and its shadow, the spotlight circle on which it rests, and the conical source of light from the upper left-hand corner, all set against the black background, are a perfect example of Outerbridge's philosophy. Art is life seen through man's inner craving for perfection and beauty.
William Bailey's Still Life with Rose Wall and Compote of 1973 is one of the last of his iconic egg paintings of the 1960s and early 1970s. In these paintings, as in all his still life, Bailey says that the objects are made up, based on reality, but neither copied nor prearranged. He separates himself from the realist painters who, Bailey says, interpret daily life and the world around us, while he is, on the contrary, trying to paint a world that's not around us. If made up, are the objects symbolic? Bailey was asked in a recent interview, to which he replied that the objects in his paintings are not symbolic. With the egg paintings, he said he began thinking about slowing the painting down and allowing the relationships to develop in time, concluding that the painting isn't read quickly because it wasn't painted quickly. The slowness and otherworldly stillness impart a serene, ordered silence. The 5 perfect eggs on the table defy expectations. Somehow we know they will not roll off the table. Perhaps because this is not reality. He was not painting from a prearranged composition.
Jeff Koons, whose art has been pegged as post-pop, exalts ordinary objects through an obsession with scale. Claiming that he is only an idea man, he hires others who fabricate the work. More than 80 assistants currently work in his New York studio. In 1994, Koons began his Celebration series, 20 different sculptures, including balloon dogs, Valentine hearts, diamonds, and Easter eggs. The present work is one of 10 enormous eggs, 5 Baroque and 5 smooth, each 7 feet by 6.5 feet by 5 feet, and uniquely colored. The Baroque eggs have a textured surface reminiscent of the crumpled foil wrapping on chocolate Easter eggs. In 2011, this egg sold to a private collector for over $6 million. Although critics are quick to read symbolic significance into Koons' overscale everyday objects, for example, claiming that despite its ordinary appearance, the Baroque egg evokes an egg symbolism, from rebirth to fertility to the Christian resurrection. Others assert that there is irony in the artist making high art out of everyday objects. Koons claims that his works are simply uncritical blow-ups of the consumer society, hence the association with pop art.
In 2008, Dutch, sometimes controversial, large-scale environmental artist Henk Hofstra installed the site-specific piece of public art, Art Accident, in one of the largest public squares in the northern state of Friesland in the Netherlands. The eggs were spray-painted one at a time over a 2-day period, with spectators initially critical, but quickly embracing the engaging installation, which later drew large crowds of locals, tourists, and shoppers. The 8 large eggs, each 100 feet wide, were flat. The 10 small ones had a 7.5-foot high, 3-dimensional yolk that was especially popular with young climbers. Another egg had 3-dimensional cut figures, apparently drowning in the flat yolk. These eggs resembled eggs sunny side up, fitting because in the summer, when the average daily temperature of Holland is around 70 degrees Fahrenheit, it may be possible, even there, for pavement to get hot enough to fry eggs. While Hofstra's installation is whimsy, it could also be seen as a critical comment on climate change. Will frying eggs on the sidewalk become routine? The eggs remained in the square for 6 months until the paint faded and the three-dimensional pieces were removed.